Okay, welcome, Jack Goessens, to this Q&A with myself, Joshua Hubbard. Tonight we've seen your films Juniper, Boba and Kiki, and everything. No, Who I Am Now. I'm totally skipping ahead. So I just want to give a quick introduction to who Jack is, and this is some of his recent achievements. Variety magazine described Jack Goessens is a filmmaker currently living in Scotland. His latest short film, 2021's Everyman, was commissioned through the Scottish Documentary Institute. Goessens also worked as an editor in a show such as Outlander and Netflix Everything Now. He sets out for directorial debut with trans coming of age project Boyfriend. Welcome, Jack Goessens.
Thanks for having me.
um, I just want to let's go back to the beginning then. What would you say is your earliest memory of film, presuming your love of cinema was a natural progression? A natural progression is what led you to becoming a director, or was it something maybe different?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a few different things that led to it ultimately. I mean, I do remember going to the cinema as a child quite a lot, and like my mum always put me in front of the TV to kind of keep me busy, and not destroying the house. But initially, I wanted to be an actor. I did a lot of acting in school, um, but I found what everyone loves about the theater, the kind of immediacy and the kind of um temporary, how do you say that, the fact that it's kind of temporary. People love that, but I didn't like that because it means I can never watch it back, and I can never show it to other people if it's not on. So that's where I was like, right, I prefer to do kind of film acting. And then because nobody was really making films in my hometown in the Netherlands, I just started making my own films with me in it, and then I realized I like that better, to make them rather than being in them. So that's kind of how the path kind of started. And initially, I wasn't sure if it was going to be directing or producing or any other kind of role. And it was at when I was studying at film school already, was when I kind of realized that I really enjoyed directing. And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow, amazing. What type of actor did you want to be when you were younger, if you mind me asking?
Definitely a character actor. Like I wouldn't want to be the lead.
It's interesting you say that about immortalizing film rather than theatre. As a performer myself, it's interesting like people's perception of that. Like I could go on tour, I could be in a show every night for so many months, and it's incredible and it's very in the moment, but like it is like you say, like it is always great to be able to go back on something. It also feels like you don't have to do the work again. Like you can just, here you go, look at this. And yeah, maybe something quite narcissistic in that. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Maybe, I don't know. I feel like it's like there's lessons in there as well, because I often go back and like re-edit my old films, like more from a kind of like learning perspective and being like, and often as well, you go back and you're like, you know what, it's not as bad as I thought, which that's kind of nice.
And I guess with film, and I guess the positive of performances, you can always, people might forget the mistakes you made, and you could never make them again going forward. But with a film, I I don't know about you, but I look back on old stuff that I've been a part of, and I go, oh, maybe I'd do that different. Like always critiquing the film again, and like people are watching it for the first time, they're very excited or they're interested, and I'm just like, oh, critique, critique, critique. I could change that.
It's good. It's good to learn.
Um, so I'd be interested to know what was driving your early filmmaking as opposed to what drives you now, and what you're interested in making. It seems like some of your earlier work is based around fictional concepts, and some of your current work draws upon personal experiences.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of interesting because you're kind of picked up on kind of like two sides of me that um are not necessarily consecutive. Those films are all kind of made after I graduated. But while I was at film school and before, I kind of had that mixture as well. But there's a reason that they are kind of consecutive in kind of recent years, because it's basically I have that telling personal stories and then kind of telling personal stories through metaphor almost, with kind of, because I quite like magic realism, so that's kind of where the two sides come from, and I try and kind of combine them, but sometimes not as, sometimes it kind of ends up leaning more towards one or the other, but with Bouba and Kiki specifically, for example, that one was, the reason that that one feels a bit more removed is because I did that on purpose, because I'd done a kind of, when you do personal stories, you're slightly more vulnerable. And I'd kind of had a bad experience where someone had taken advantage of that and had like kind of critiqued me in a way that just ended up becoming really personal rather than about the film. So when I was doing Bouba and Kiki, I was like, this is kind of like a shield where it's still a personal story, but it's not as obvious to people. But then what happened is I almost kind of missed the personal connection that you then have with your audience when you're doing personal stories. And also I had a really funny moment. So Bouba and Kiki was done in a pitch. So I got some support in a pitch at the Glasgow Short Film Festival, and one person on the panel said, when I was describing the characters, they were like, "Oh, young guys like you have to be really careful when they're describing like female characters." And as a trans person, that's like a really funny comment because she didn't realize that I wasn't like a cishet guy. So she was just like, like guys like you, and I was just like, no, not guys like me. And then I realized that the work then kind of felt less authentic because people weren't really like reading me right, and then they weren't reading the film right. So then I kind of went back to like going a bit more personal again with things. But I'd like to kind of find a mixture where I can actually really get the kind of magic realist. Well, the synesthesia in Bouba and Kiki is not magic realist, but it's kind of for lack of better description of the kind of style, I guess, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think there's something like a lot of my trans male friends, they connect with a lot of like magic realism. I don't know whether this is like a thing, like a nuance, but like, like I have a lot of friends that are really into like Link from Zelda as like, and they always describe him as like, I want to be the magic boy from Zelda and stuff. So who knows, maybe you'll be the director of Zelda.
Yeah, maybe it's a trans thing. Maybe, yeah, it's kind of, it's an escapism, isn't it? Like it's the kind of, because the world in our head is I don't know, like sometimes we have to escape into our head because the real world doesn't quite match up with things.
Absolutely, and I plan you will find that, like you said, that balance, and I think it'll end up being very beautiful because after like seeing your work, I can see your imagination like ticking and stuff, and I think like as a director, I'm only going to see that work grow and like those ideas grow. Like I think Boba and Kiki is a very clever idea, and I think I'll be very interested to see where you go with that. Um, and talking about vulnerability and stuff and like my own personal experiences, I've done like documentary stuff where it's been based on me, and I found that very difficult. Um, so I can totally relate when you're putting yourself into that vulnerable position, and it does feel like people are picking you apart, but also like from my own perspective, I also wanted to make sure that it was right, like because it is like you kind of, especially if like I was in the circumstances, I wasn't the director, so it feels like you're handing yourself over to like, I don't know, speak on your behalf a little bit in a way, in a film language. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
I was gonna say because I did the same with Everyman, which I did then after Bouba and Kiki and after Juniper made Everyman. I was like, I just need to get over that fear, and just put myself in front of the camera and like tell my story. And if people want to attack me, then I'm ready now.
So touching upon the experiences of making Juniper, Boba, and Kiki, and Who Am I Now? I'd just like to kind of know a little bit about the process briefly about each one, and like, were there some challenges that came up? Like we've already kind of just discussed a little bit, but like, were there like maybe anything that related or something you found out about your working process that's got a commonality?
The context of the story is they kind of all like they all kind of have like a logical kind of follow on of each other, I guess. So when I graduated from film school, I got into that kind of classic situation of now I need to get film funding and I'm not getting it. So I was very lucky that I managed to find a career in post production. So that meant that I could afford to self fund films. So I was like, right, I'm just gonna do it that way, and then hopefully that will lead to something. So that's Bouba and Kiki. I basically was ready to shoot, and then I found out about the Glasgow Short Film Festival pitch. So that won the pitch, and then they gave me equipment. So that made like a huge difference because it meant I didn't have to rent anything, and and I could shoot this film. So and I should add as well that I'd written Bouba and Kiki kind of as one potential graduation film on the film at the film school, but didn't end up shooting. So so the idea had been something that I'd kind of been developing for a while. So then when I kind of finished that and I started submitting it to festivals and started kind of learning about that process, the kind of feedback that I was getting was that people had issue with the production values of the film, which was really painful because it was a no budget film and people are moaning about that it looks cheap, which I didn't think it looked that cheap, but so I was like, right, well, this is really pissing me off. For the next film, I'm gonna really, really focus on the production values, basically. So that's kind of where Juniper came from. And story wise, that was actually came from another short that I'm developing that I'm actually still developing at the moment. And I'd taken the other story that I'm still working on is a story about trans character with a family member who has dementia, which is based on a personal story. But then doing the kind of research into dementia, and also I was working at STV at the time, broadcasting, and we were covering a dementia storyline on Emmerdale. So I was learning a lot from that as well, and we went down to like the Emmerdale set and spoke to them and spoke to their research and stuff. So I was like learning a lot about dementia from all sides, basically, and basically I wanted to do this kind of like perspective because they were kind of talking about dementia is a little bit like being drunk, and I was just like, oh, what would that be like if kind of like a generation that kind of goes out has that kind of experience. So that's kind of story-wise where it came from. And I thought I could shoot this in a day, because I'm self-funding it again and I want higher production values. I really can't afford to do like more than a day and have just something like short concept. So that's kind of where Juniper then came from. And then for Who I Am Now, I need to go back a little bit because at the pitch for Bouba and Kiki, I was pitching against a producer, Rhys Cargan, and we ended up keeping in touch after that. And he was developing Who I Am Now with another filmmaker called Zan Scott. But she unfortunately passed away. So then he still wanted to do something with the project. So what he did is he found me to direct it and Michael Lee Richardson to write it. And he was like, right, you worked together on this, and we kind of developed it into something that was more our own. And he got some funding for it from Creative Scotland, which was kind of development money for him. And then we shot that. So that was kind of a very different experience for me because that was something that I hadn't written myself. I was working with the writer. which was an experience that I wanted as well, and was very kind of it was very different, but like really, really, really good thing to do, I think, for directors, because you often get that question: do you want to focus on writing or directing? And it's hard to answer that question if you haven't actually done that. If you haven't taken someone else's script and gone, is this still fun? Do I still want to do this?
And just the final part of that question, have you found any sort of commonality of your process during through these films?
I think so. I think it's that kind of classic thing where I find that I return to certain shots, because for me that conveys like a certain emotion that I feel like returns in films. It's a it's a tricky one, because I definitely feel like I have a style, but I find it very tricky to kind of verbalize what that is. And I think it's fun that you put all three of them together, because I think it becomes obvious when you see more of my work, but it's not obvious when you see one of them.
Yeah. Well, don't tell us, just show us through the art of film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't show you, but I can show you through a contemporary dance. Um, that's what I was gonna ask. If you'd be open about telling us which film school you went to, you've mentioned.
Oh yeah. I went to the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, so it's kind of known as a music and drama school, but they have a film department, which is really handy within the music and drama school, because you've got actors and you've got musicians and you've got dancers, and everyone can be part of your project.
Absolutely, and I do not know to this day why that doesn't happen more on a regular basis when they're planning curriculum. And for example, the first ever year I went to Northern School of Contemporary Dance, but before that I went to Liverpool John Moores on the dance course, and we were put with all the sport and athleticism courses, and it was because there was equipment and gyms and stuff, but obviously like me, young teenage queer contemporary dancer amongst all these big jock types, I was like, I feel like I've just stayed in school. Like this isn't the fantasy. So yeah, but the musicians and the dancers and the filmmakers together, thank you. So we kind of just I think some of the last question kind of answers a bit of this, and that's fine. But the question now is something I'd like to touch upon is the inclusion of the presence of Glasgow that's streamlined for your work. I personally connect with seeing film made in the UK using regional accents, characters, and places, as opposed to a lot of London-centric work we see produced from the UK. You've just talked about value budget and stuff, but I'm just wondering, how important it is to you, or whether it's like a matter of just practicality.
No, I'm myself. I'm from a kind of like small town in the Netherlands, and I always kind of describe that area as, what Scotland or the North is to the UK. That's kind of what where I'm from is to the Netherlands. We have our own dialect and our own accent, and people make fun of that. Yeah, it's called Maastricht. Yeah. Yeah, so people always make fun of us, and they're always like, "Oh, well, they're backwards" and all that kind of stuff. So, and I see those kind of like same attitudes in the UK sometimes, with regards to Scotland and the north of England, and I'm like, yeah, So I'm immediately I'm on a side already, because I have that same experience from back home. But also, I mean, with Bouba and Kiki specifically, I wanted to use, it's kind of, I was inspired by films like Amélie, and her, even, the use of the city and the kind of loneliness of the city, and Glasgow's a big city, so I wanted to kind of use that in the story, and I think that kind of comes through in a lot of my work, because for me it was such a big thing to come from. Maastricht is officially a city, but it's so small, like it's just a town. So for me, going to Glasgow was, go to the big city. That's and then that kind of loneliness that you get hit with, that people, experience, and then finding kind of solace in community, LGBT community for me. And that's what I moved for. So I think that's like a theme that runs in a lot of my films and a lot of my work.
So I curated an evening of trans masc identities and featuring trans filmmakers, trans actors, and trans directors, curated to culturally reflect various trans pride events coinciding with Manchester Sparkle Weekend, London Trans Pride, and people may be interested to hear that Trans Pride in Scotland will take place on the 19th of August in Dundee at Bonair Hall. Am I saying that right? Do you know Bonair? No, Bonair
I'm
Hall.
not sure actually. Never been to Dundee.
Maybe it's Sabbath time, August 19th. Be there or be square. I'd be interested to hear what you think about what you think trans and specifically trans male representation is currently at in the film industry. What do you think the future of trans on screen is, and what would you like to see in the future happen?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of like up and coming trans masculine filmmakers, and I'm really excited about it. I'm always trying to work with them as well, and I do work with other trans masculine filmmakers. Usually, I come on board as an editor, or I try. And I think it's really fun because we all are so different. And you saw that in the program you curated as well, that it's completely different styles and it's completely different stories. And then sometimes there's a little bit of overlap as well in the kind of, we do have similar experiences, and then but people express that in such a different way. And I think that's really exciting, and I think that's really, really fun. I think the one thing that I'm kind of like missing in the kind of, you know trans on screen, kind of new emerging generation, is that there's not a lot of trans feminine directors. It's mostly trans masculine directors, and I don't know if that's the kind of, you know misogyny of the film industry that's kind of internalized, maybe. I don't know, but I think it's, it's looking positive. We need more trans feminine people too.
Amazing. Last year, the reason why I kind of did a specific trans male curation is because last year, around about this time, I did a female one, but I kind of just showed like a feature film, but it was so pretty by Jessica Dunn Rovanelli, and her film is like all the characters is very trans focused and very trans heavy. So I was like, I'll give it to the boys this time. I mean, the whole curation that I've done the past 2 years has always had the inclusion of trans people, and just in general putting it out there and showing people that these films exist and these amazing filmmakers exist, and also just like it's all about perception, and like there's so much perception that we don't like as a cis person. I don't know, and also just putting it out, like just show and go, look at this, look how imaginative like film can actually be, look at this different way you can see life, and also being neurodivergent, there's a strong connection sometimes with a lot of trans people, and I feel like I connect with a lot of their filmmaking in that way, just how things are done like quite viscerally and through movement and through sound and light rather than just straightforward script and text. I think to kind of wrap this up, I'd really be interested to hear about any upcoming projects that you have and we can look out for, and where we can follow you on social media. Maybe you could mention a little bit about Boyfriend.
Yes. Yeah. So the kind of big project that I'm working on at the moment is Boyfriend. So that's my feature. I'm working. I'm on script drafts at the moment. So yeah, that's one of those kind of like unpredictable journeys that, I'm hoping to get some production funding at some point. But at the moment we are in funded development, so we're on the way. And we went to Cinemark in Rotterdam, so we were kind of speaking to people who can help us and stuff. So that's great. And then you can follow me on. I'm under Jack Goessens on like all all, well, not all platforms. I can't get into TikTok. I think I'm too old. But I'm on Instagram, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, but I haven't used that yet. And I've got a website as well, which is just jackgoessens.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you for doing this with me today. Big thank you for your time. It's been very interesting to hear what you have to say. And I wish you all the success with Boyfriend and in the future.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.